Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 2 of week 2, and the topic of today's lecture is Max Horkheimer, and it is a continuation of our lecture 1 of week 2. So, in our previous lecture we studied about who is Max Horkheimer, and we also studied about the contributions which he has made to the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. So, we will study some more detail about the life and his important contributions, and with this we start with one of the important information about Max Horkheimer, that he was born near Stuttgart into the family of a wealthy Jewish businessman. With Hitler coming to power in 1933, he actually shifted the Institute for Social Research from the Frankfurt first to Geneva, then to Paris, and finally to the Columbia University in New York. So, in our last lecture we have seen that he had to shift the Institute for Social Research because of the advent of the fascism, and here again we are mentioning that at which places he had to shift before he finally shifted to Columbia University. He had to shift the institute to first Geneva, then to Paris, and finally to New York at Columbia University. In his essays of 1930, he talked about how critical theory is different from traditional theories. So, I think this is one of the most important, or you can say one of the first contribution we must understand that he has made to the evolution and development of critical theory. Because it is not only important to understand what is critical theory, but also why to have another theory when there are in existence already so many theories, and why not to use all those theories to understand the evils of capitalism, for example. And in this essay he also mentioned how the liberal capitalism have created racial foundation for totalitarianism. Now, this liberal capitalism, it promised so much hope, it promised so much of development, so much of prosperity, but at the end of the day it also led to, or it you can say promoted and facilitated the rise of various forms of the so called the totalitarianism, in the form of the rise of fascism, in the form of rise of Nazism. So, therefore, we have to understand that why such things happened, why the promises and hopes of the ideology of liberalism, it got degenerated into totalitarian ideology, or you can say in the establishment of totalitarianism. Now, his other work deal with some of the very important questions or issues of the time. One is the issue of mass culture, then he talked about and discussed instrumental rationality and the authoritarian state. Now, we will have a look into all these aspects in our lecture 2 and 3, and we will see that what have been the deleterious effect of mass culture and the emphasis on instrumental rationality on our everyday lives. Horkheimer and his work constituted the dominant force in the formation of critical theory. So, we must know that and understand by this time that it was Horkheimer who is the most important force or the figure in the formation of critical theory, or in laying down the foundation of critical theory. His writing has been acknowledged as the blueprint of critical theory. So, here you can understand what is the stature, what is the position of Max Horkheimer in the Frankfurt School. Horkheimer's inaugural lecture of 1930, which is titled "The Current Condition of Social Philosophy and the Task of an Institute of Social Research," he signaled an important shift in the institute's emphasis and scope. So, we know that before the advent of Max Horkheimer, at the central stage in the Institute for Social Research, the objective and scope of the institute was something different. It was not so much known for the promotion of critical theory. But with his coming to power and the central stage of the institute, he signaled an important shift in the institute's emphasis and scope. So, therefore, he has played a very monumental role in so called making popular the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. Now, from the founding of the institute in 1923 to the date of Horkheimer's address, the institute was concerned only with empirical social science with little interest in philosophical questions. Now, to get an idea of what was happening before Horkheimer actually took over the Institute of Social Research, we find that the scholars there were dealing with the empirical social sciences and they were not so much worried about the philosophical questions. And that was one of the important reasons why after the advent of Horkheimer and his emphasis on the goals and objectives of the Frankfurt School, we find that there is a marked departure from what was being done or what was objective of the earlier phase and what was objective after Horkheimer actually took charge of the institute. Now, he discussed about the destructive effect of instrumental reason. This we have already discussed and we will also discuss in some more detail that how the instrumental rationality, when the reason is used as an instrument to dominate nature or to use human beings for domination, for exploitation, then we know that what consequences it has created for the society as a whole, how much destruction it has caused of the nature. Now, Horkheimer argued that human beings can escape from the homogenizing and the totalizing forces of society through individual action, non-conformism and welding together of a solidarity based on the experience of shared suffering and empathy. Now, he has here highlighted multiple ways of emancipation, of getting rid of all these ills and promises in the society. He argues that the so called emancipation can be possible only when he can escape from this homogeneity and the so called the totalizing forces of the society, where it turns human beings into a homogeneous entity, where it actually destroys the uniqueness and the creative instinct of the individual. So, this homogeneity is so much destructive of the uniqueness and also of the creative instinct of the individual. So, he has to escape that. He has to be aware and be alert about this homogenizing influence. And second is that this we can do through individual action. So, at the individual level we can be alert and we can be conscious about these influences on our society at everyday basis. And by being alert we can reduce these homogenizing influences on our lives. Then the second, he says that we have to practice non-conformism, because homogenization leads to a type of conformity, and if we adopt a conformist behavior, then we cannot think of change, because we will follow what the majority is doing. We will adopt the thought processes which the majority in the society holds at a particular point of time. So, we will not be talking about change, we will not be talking about transformation. So, this attitude is not congenial for questioning the injustices and exploitative practices in the society. So, if we want change, we have to think in terms of non-conformity, and in place of conformity we have to be creative, because creative is the essence of human being, and only by being creative and innovative we can think of new ideas, we can think of new understanding and provide unique solutions to the problems in the society. And the third he mentions is building together of a solidarity based on the experience of shared suffering and empathy. So, there are a multiple groups and individuals in the society who may be suffering, who may need empathy. So, through the consolidation of those so called, you can say, the like minded individuals, we can achieve a certain sense of solidarity, a unity for cause, and this will help us in organizing for change, and also we can ask as a unit, as a strong unit for transformation in the society. Thus, Horkheimer hoped to create a new philosophically informed interdisciplinary science. So, a science which is connected with philosophy, which is not delinked from philosophy, and second, it is interdisciplinary. It is drawing from different disciplines. We can say it is connected with all the different disciplines, whether sociology, history, economics, political science, and even the natural sciences. If we understand the interdisciplinarity of our perspective, then we can get a much wider and comprehensive understanding of injustices and exploitation in the society. Now, let us understand how he has defined the term critical theory, which is the most important contribution of Horkheimer, because the way he defined and explained the objectives, that provided the epistemological foundation for the further evolution of critical theory. Now, Horkheimer takes the term from Marx, and early critical theory was Marxist in nature. So, we must know that the critical theory is not only associated with the Frankfurt school, but they have drawn inspiration and being influenced by the Marxist tradition. So, their theory is Marxist in nature, and Marx or Marxist theory is also a type of critical theory. Horkheimer first used the term, that is critical theory, in his seminal 1937 essay, that is Traditional and Critical Theory. So, in this very famous essay, as the name suggests, that in this essay he is drawing distinction between the features of traditional theory and the features of so called the traditional and the critical theories, and in this way he is elaborating the meaning of critical theory, and therefore, this is considered as a classic statement of the structure and aims of critical theory. It is a classic statement, or it is a manifesto also. At some other point I have mentioned that this is a manifesto. He provided a manifesto where everything is clearly mentioned and stated out regards the structure and aims of critical theory. Now, he made a distinction between traditional theory and critical theory on the basis that critical theory has a specific practical purpose. Now, this is very important. Here we are talking about how a critical theory can be distinguished from a traditional theory, and he said that we can distinguish a critical theory from a traditional theory with the fact that every critical theory has a practical purpose. It is having a practical aspect. A theory is critical to the extent that it seeks human emancipation from slavery, act as the liberating influence, and works to create a world which satisfies the needs and powers of human beings. Now, these are the words of Horkheimer. So, the practical purpose is emancipation of, because ultimately values without practice is of no use, is having only a limited application. So, if you have certain objectives, they need to be actualized in practice. So, therefore, whatever forms of slavery and bondages in the society, the objective of critical theory is empirical in nature, that is, to seek human emancipation from slavery. Act as a liberating influence. Such theory should act as a liberating, that means its influence should be such, it helps in raising the consciousness of the people in the society and helps them in making efforts for their liberation, and works to create a world which satisfies the needs and power of human being. So, the objective is to create a world where every human's needs and powers, they are satisfied, their needs are satisfied, their powers are developed, or in other words they are empowered. So, therefore, another very important criteria Horkheimer has given, by which we can understand whether a theory is a critical theory or not, and it is very important, because a critical theory is adequate if it meets three important criteria. So, in that way, by giving the important characteristics of critical theory, he is in a way making a distinction here between the so called critical theory and the other traditional theories, because the other traditional theories, they do not have, or they may be having one or two of these objectives, but not all the three. And what are they? The first is, it must be explanatory. Second, it must be practical. Third, it must be normative. And the most important thing which Horkheimer is talking about is that all the three attributes must be present at the same time in any critical theory. They must be present at the same time. It is not that only one or two is present and the other is not there, then it is not a critical theory. All the three attributes, when are there at one time in any theory, then we can say that such a theory is a critical theory. Now, we must understand what we mean by these three criteria of a critical theory. First is explanatory. What we mean by being explanatory? Explanatory means that the theory must explain what is wrong with the current social reality. So, ultimately, whenever we are talking about the emancipation of human beings, we have to first understand that where lies the problem. Awareness of the problem is the first step. When we are aware of the problem, then the next is we have to go into the detail or the reasons behind the problem, that why such operation, why such exploitative practices are in existence. So, we need an explanation so that we can make the people understand that why such practices have been taking place for ages and why they are still entrenched in the society. So, understanding the reasons behind any phenomena, any structure or any crisis is the first step. So, it helps in providing an explanation with what is wrong in the society and what are the reasons behind it. And the second is practical. As we have already mentioned, that one of the objective of the critical theory is that it is having a practical purpose. Without practice or without connection with the practicalities of life, the objective of critical theory is not fulfilled, or we cannot consider it to be a critical theory. So, therefore, it should be practical. And what does it mean to be practical? It means that one must specify the means and the actors who can bring about change, because ultimately the objective is transformation. The objective is to overturn the present system, so that a new system is established, and for that we need certain means, we need certain actors who can participate in the change, who can bring about the change. So, that is a practical or the empirical part of the, you can say, critical theory. And the third is the normative, and this is very important because it should provide the norms on the basis of which explanation is provided and social transformation is thought. Because ultimately, whenever we are talking about any change, whenever we are giving explanations about any social injustice or any situation, it has to be based on certain norms, it should have a normative basis. Why we are asking for change? Why the present, you can say, the situation is considered to be unjust? So, normative basis, on the basis on which explanation is provided and social transformation is sought. So, normative basis, and therefore, it is one of the reason why Horkheimer has argued for making the interlinkages between social sciences and philosophy. Because if we are studying the social realities or the social problems in the society, and if we do not link it with the important ideals of philosophy, then how we can provide the normative basis? So, to provide normative basis, we have to combine so called the study of philosophy with the study of social sciences. Again, when we come back to the dialectics of enlightenment, which was a very important work, or you can say the signature work, which was done by Max Horkheimer along with his colleague Adorno. In this work, they have pointed out the barbarity of Nazi Germany, American capitalism, dumbing down of culture by the modern entertainment industry. So, you can see that in this book, they have not only talked about the dialectics of reason or rationality or the Enlightenment tradition, they have also touched upon some of the extended topics which are connected with this, and they are the analysis of the American capitalism and also mentioning the barbarity or atrocities which are practiced by the Nazi Germany. It is also talking about the dumbing down of culture, how the culture has become dumb, which means of no use. It has lost its meaning, it has lost its utility in the modern society, which has been converted into an entertainment industry. The culture has become equivalent to entertainment, and the culture has been commodified. And this commodity, or you can say the making of the commodification of culture and the commercialization of culture, has led to the dumbing down of culture. Now, the author of the dialectics of enlightenment, that is Horkheimer and Adorno, argued that enlightenment has failed in the context of especially the rise of culture industry and anti-Semitism. They have also written a lot about the rise of anti-Semitism, which we will discuss in some of our other lectures. Another important theme which was very much discussed and understood in this work was the notion of alienation. This is one of the important byproduct or the evil impact of capitalism in the modern society, which has been highlighted by Karl Marx also. In the early writings of Karl Marx, we have seen that he has mentioned in detail how the workers in the capitalist society suffer the process of or the phenomena of alienation at multiple levels. And the subsequent Marxist thinkers, and especially I would like to take the name of Erich Fromm, Herbert Marcuse, they have all discussed in detail the process of alienation and how that has inflicted our society. Now, what we mean by alienation? If we just have a look at and again remember what we mean by alienation, it means estrangement of human beings from his world, from his reality, from his own self. And if we talk about the human value, we find that human value is being reduced to the value of the marketplace. So, market is deciding what is the value of the human beings. The market is created by the human beings, but now human beings have become so subservient to the laws and processes of market that now the value or its valuation is being done by the market. And how it is done? You are what you earn. So, the status of a human being is determined by his monetary and economic capabilities. So, this is the worth and the value of human being, which has been reduced to in the so called capitalist society. So, alienation is not merely the symptom of something seriously amiss in the world created by human beings. It is a fault that will lead eventually to a terminal implosion in the entire system. So, ultimately this process is increasing with the advancement of technology, with the advancement of the so called modern society, expansion of capitalism. This will explode. The phenomena of alienation will spread, and we know that the extreme form of alienation is the so called estrangement, to such an extent that it can even lead to the rise of the suicidal tendencies amongst human beings. So, this is very important to understand, and we can see if we have a look at the process of alienation and its consequences around the human societies across the world, what we find is that the cases of depression and the cases of people commit suicides are increasing across all the societies, especially in the developed countries, in the industrially advanced countries, in the modern societies. The rate of suicide is much higher in comparison to the rural and underdeveloped society. So, therefore, this phenomena has to be understood from a larger perspective. Also, Horkheimer in his early essay made a distinction between idealism and materialism. He also made a distinction between rationalism and irrationalism. So, when talking about the concept of materialism, he said that there are two types of materialism. One is simple and second is reductive materialism, and the second is the dialectic or critical materialism. Now, the representative of the reductive materialism is the materialism of the Enlightenment French philosophy that reduces real feature of the world to a physical face. So, it is talking only in terms of the physical attributes of the world. It also includes the logical positivism of Vienna Circle, that is excessive emphasis on science and the utility of scientific methods. So, that is the variety or the type of the materialism or the reductive materialism which Horkheimer is talking about. And the second type of critical or dialectical materialism is associated with the critical theory, which is known to us. Also, Horkheimer made a distinction between materialism and idealism. While making this distinction, he categorized idealism into two categories. One is the rationalist and second is the irrationalist. Of course, the rationalist ideal is associated with the traditional theories of idealism, which begins, for example, in the form of German idealism from Kant to Hegel. In the next lecture, we will understand that what we mean by irrational idealism, and there we will understand that how Horkheimer has emphasized the importance of which type of rationalism or which type of materialism as important for the critical theory. So, with this I come to the end of this lecture, followed by certain questions which are based on the topics which are covered. What is critical theory? Explain its important features. What are the types of materialism as per Horkheimer? What is dialectic of enlightenment? So, all these topics we have discussed, and in the lecture 1 and in the lecture 2 of week 2 we have discussed the various important contributions of Horkheimer. We have also studied about the life and the important work of Horkheimer and what role he has played in the foundation of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, and through his work how he could develop the epistemological and the methodological foundation of critical theory. Now, in the next lecture, we will continue with what we have studied in lecture 2, and we will learn some more about the contributions of Max Horkheimer yet to the critical tradition. Thank you very much. Hope you have enjoyed the lecture.